Constituent Board of the Quality Control of India, QCI, and National Accreditation Body for Certification and Inspection attached to Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and he retired in July 2019. He has almost 43 plus years of experience in the field of quality, standards, certification, accreditation, and technical regulations, having worked earlier in the Bureau of Indian Standards, the National Standards Body, and the Export Inspection Council, India's official export regulator and certification body under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Sir has led a number of voluntary conformity assessment schemes across sectors, from yoga professionals to medical devices, from good agricultural practices to food safety, from private security agencies to traditional medicines, Ayurveda trainings, and has supported a number of regulators in developing systems for use of third-party inspection, certification in sectors such as food, oil and gas, medical devices, etc. Sir is currently associated with a number of organizations. I will name a few of them to you because these could be of very relevant use to our startups and founders here. He's a member of the CDM accreditation panel of UNFCCC since 2007, member of boards of Yoga Certification Board, Naturopathy Registration Board, and Ayurveda Training Accreditation Board set up by the Ministry of Ayush. Sir is also a member of Accreditation Approval Committee of ASI GmbH Bonn and ASI North America. He is an evaluator for ICL Alliance of Sustainability Standards and Certification Schemes. Sir is the chairman, steering committee and good clinical practices professional certification team, CDSA, THSI. He is the co-chair of steering committee for voluntary certifications in biomedical sector, the AMTZ. Having worked with such international bodies, Sir has been recognized as a national and international expert in such fields. There is much more about Mr. Johari, which we will learn through the experience that Sir has. Sir has also brought an expert along with him today, Mr. M.G. Satyendra. I will request Anil Sir to first introduce Satyendra Sir to all of us.
Sure, thank you, Vatsala. It's a privilege to be invited to speak to your audience. And as I said, IIT Kanpur has special place because I studied in IIT Kanpur once upon a time. It's the most surprising part is that when I left IIT in 1981, until 2020, I had no connect with IIT Kanpur through my career. And then I ran into Professor Amitabh. And he was looking for just one line advice, which he was struggling with, how to get ventilators approved. And I told him, you don't need any approval because there's no regulation. But there are international standards and you can possibly get certified. And that much of advice he was struggling with. So that's how, it is, about standards and regulations. So I'm very happy to be here. And I'm happy to introduce Satyendra, who is a former colleague in BIS, far more experienced practitioner in medical devices than I am. I am not a active practitioner in medical device sector. I can talk a lot on medical devices, but all that is, through experience of not having practiced actually evaluation of medical devices. Satyendra is an expert on that. He left BIS and worked with some multinational bodies like Canadian Standards Association and Intertech, etc. And now is a freelance. And I was happy to introduce him to IIT Kanpur as well, because he brings tremendous value to medical device sector. So I invited him over. I thought there may be sometimes very technical questions which I may not be able to tackle. And he would be the right person to tackle those. So thank you, Satyendra, for sparing time and being here.
Thank you, Anil. It's always a pleasure to be associated with IIT Kanpur. I was just introducing to Vatsala that I'm already there with the incubators and startups.
Yes.
Thanks to you, Anil, and of course, Amitabh, sir. And I'm also, the involvement is with their lab, which is almost now ready for accreditation.
Good.
One more visit is due maybe March and or April, and they'll be ready for application. They already applied, and now only I have to do a mock audit and see that things are okay. So
Great.
I'll be there again. So if any of you want to have any program right there, we can do it. Thank you, Anil, once again.
Thank you so much. I would also like to bring to your notice that we have along with us today Ms. Shreya Malik, who is the AVP and domain head of our biotech, medtech, agritech, and green tech vertical. Shreya, I would like you to officially start the session with your few words.
Thank you so much, Vatsala. We are so thankful to Anil sir, Anil Jory sir, and also Satyendra sir for coming on board for this very important session. We have several medtech startups with us, and they always have so many questions on the different regulatory pathway for their journey from translation to commercialization. And we'll be very glad that today Anil sir will address all those issues in his presentation. And we'll be also happy if you would be taking an interactive session post the presentation. And also we would like you to visit our campus and interact with the startups. They'll be very happy to gain from your knowledge on in this sector. Your expertise and your experience in this area is very rich and valuable, and we hope to take your guidance and mentorship to take the startup ahead in their commercialization journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shreya. So, yeah, Anil sir, shall we start? Would you want to screen your presentation or shall I do it for you?
No, I want to do it myself.
Okay, sir. And this is for all the participants who've joined us. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box or the chat box. I will take them up. And in the end, we will take up questions.
So can you see the screen and can you see the presentation?
Yes, sir, we can see the screen.
Yes, we can see. You have to go to full screen, that's all.
Yeah,
I've done full screen.
That's it.
So let me go back. Okay, all right. Good morning, everybody. As I said, I'm very happy to be here and happy to share whatever information I have with you people. When I started dealing with startups, one of the first things that surprised me was that they seem to first prepare a product and then look for what standard to meet. And I think fundamentally that is where the problem was. We were taught that standards have to be built into the design. So before you design a product, you must know what standards you are going to meet. And therefore, it's very necessary to know in advance what standards you are required to meet or you intend to meet. Both. When I say required to meet, it has a different meaning. And when I say intend to meet, it has a different meaning. And we'll come to that. And that's captured in the title. When you're required to meet means regulation, it's by law. When you intend to meet, means it's a standard, a voluntary standard. You want to meet X, Y, or Z standard. So therefore, it's important to understand these concepts and these issues right in the beginning itself. I'm sure all of you recall early 2020 when COVID struck India, and what kind of crazy times in my lifetime, which is much larger than yours, 66 years odd. I think I haven't seen a time like that when we were scrambling for all kinds of things, PPEs, ventilators, oximeters, oxygen concentrators, some medicines like chloroquine, remdesivir. And the problem was, either we were not producing, especially medical devices. I was surprised at that time to know for the first time, I didn't know this in 2020, that we were not even producing PPEs. We were not producing N95 masks at that point of time, or hardly producing any. And even today, our import dependence on medical devices is as high as 80%. Or demand outstripped production. There was more demand, there was no production. Or there were, as it happens times of shortages, unethical practices, hoarding, people overcharging, etc. With travel broken, supply lines got broken. So if you wanted to source something from another country, it's not possible. You can't travel there, they can't come here, movement was off. So each country on its own, almost a situation like that. In a situation like that, quality becomes secondary. I mean, you are looking at, I know for sure that where are the PPEs? Quality to baad mein baat kare. First thing, please get something onto to the doctors and the frontline workers, something to wear, whatever it is, in the name of PPE. Ministry of Health did issue some guidelines on quality of PPEs based on a WHO guideline, but it referred to foreign standards, and it did not say what mechanism is to be followed. Now, as individuals, let's think about this. Do you think products like drugs or medical device should come with assured quality and safety? It should not be left to us to test or ascertain whether it's a good product or not. We should be assured as common people. We should be sure we go to a shop and we buy a medical device or we buy a drug that it works. So that means the next question be should quality be ensured by law? The answer would be yes, it should be ensured by law. We can't afford a situation where we do not know whether this quality is okay or not. Which means that there should be regulations in place. And I see another mistake. So, which means loosely, it means that standards should be enforced by law. The unfortunate part was as of early 2020, most of the medical devices, especially those which were needed in COVID times, were unregulated. None of them was regulated, not ventilators. That's how I told Professor Amitabh, you don't need any approval. Just go ahead, produce a ventilator, place it in the market. If it works, it works. PPs were unregulated. Pulse oximeters were unregulated. Oxygen concentrators were unregulated. There was no assurance of quality at all. Only a very limited number of medical devices were regulated. It's pure coincidence. It has nothing to do with COVID. That in February 2020 itself, CDUSA had issued some regulations which were to be implemented at a future date. We'll come to that. Now, globally, there has been a practice of specifying standards by law, especially on grounds of health and safety. It's not something new. It's been there for several years. We used to have what is called a Prevention of Food Adulteration Act, PFA, now replaced by Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. We are still having Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1945. We have, you might have seen, compulsory ISI mark on several products like LPG cylinders, cement. It started in somewhere in 1983. It's 40 years now since cement was brought under compulsory BIS certification. So this practice of specifying standards by law has been around for quite some time, but it got codified as globalization came. It got codified into World Trade Organization's agreements. There are a number of agreements in World Trade Organization. Two of them relate to products quality and standards, safety, in fact, and standards. One is the mother agreement, we can say, Agreement on Technical Barriers to Trade. It's called TBT agreement. The other is Agreement on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures, called SPS agreement. This applies to human, animal, and plant health. So if you're trading in food, if you're trading in plant products, etc., or animal products, then this agreement comes into play. Food safety is covered here. But everything other than food or plant or animal products is covered under TBT agreement. So drugs and medical devices will be governed by the provisions of TBT agreement. TBT agreement has a definition now. So earlier we used to have, you and I and Satyendra would also remember, when we were in BIS, we were taught voluntary standards and mandatory standards. That was the expression used. That expression mandatory standards disappeared on 1st of January 1995 because TBT agreement defined a term called technical regulations. And that term is here in front of you. This is the Sorry. This is the definition. Technical document which lays down product characteristics or their related processes and production methods. So it's not only product characteristics, it could be related production method or process also. For example, GMP in drugs, good manufacturing practices. In medical devices, it is quality management systems. We'll come to that. So it's not only product. You could have GMP, good manufacturing practices, good hygienic practices in food, etc. also in the regulation. And the operative part is compliance is mandatory. It may also include labeling, packaging, marking, etc. So let's say technical regulations. That's the technically correct term. Technical regulations. Let's say regulations in general. Standards mean the definition of standard is almost similar, but the compliance is not mandatory. So that is voluntary standards. So standards today in TBT terms by definition means voluntary standards. Technical regulations and voluntary standards instead of mandatory standards and voluntary standards. Technical regulations and standards. These are the two terms to be used, technically speaking. For example, ISO 13485 for quality management systems in medical devices. That's a voluntary standard, international standard. If you wish to adopt, go ahead and adopt. If you don't, you're free to, not to. Similarly, in healthcare, since you people will deal with hospitals as well, NABH accreditation, for example. NABH there's a board in Quality Council of India, which is where I work. I worked in NABCB, another board, and NABH was another board. These are voluntary standards. About 10,000 hospitals have gone for NABH accreditation out of an estimated 1 lakh hospitals in India. So that's voluntary. If you can conduct your business without adopting that standard, that's fine. If you think that standard brings value to you in terms of marketing, in terms of improved processes, in terms of cost reduction, in terms of efficiency, well, go ahead and adopt the standard. So, but what are the grounds for regulation? On what grounds can you do regulation? These are also specified in TBT. 5 grounds have been listed, but they are only illustrative. There could be more. The 5 which are listed are health, so drugs, medical devices, they are issue of health. Safety, like LPG cylinders, electrical appliances, they should be safe. Common man is using electrical appliance, you are using electric iron at home, are mothers, housewives, typically who were housewives earlier, at least my generation. They don't know anything about electrical engineering. They need to iron the clothes and they need a safe iron. That's it. Environment, like emission limits is being set for products, for vehicles, for cars in India. Deceptive trade practices where you can be fooled. Best example is gold jewelry, whether it's 18 karat or 22 karat, 24 karat, you don't know. So government is bringing in hallmarking. You might have heard of hallmarking or BIS, which was voluntary for years. It started in late 90s, but is being made mandatory now. Or national security, where your data can be stolen or something can happen. So some equipment, some chip is there, you're already your WhatsApp university tells us all kinds of stories that some chip or something, your data is going. So telecom equipment, possibly one place where national security is involved. You don't want to lose your data or critical information. Similarly, for healthcare, there's an agreement called General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS. It's called GATS. It has same grounds for regulation as in TBT, but there are a couple of additional grounds listed there. Privacy of data. So recently, we have this Data Protection Act, which has come in India, which will apply to, of course, healthcare and even medical devices. I mean, you may have information, you may have data, which is to be kept private. You may have obligations under Data Privacy Act. So healthcare and public order, which is a very wide term. To maintain public order, government can bring in regulations. In the products, the above bullet, 5 grounds are listed, but it says such as. The expression used in TBT agreement is such as. So, for example, energy efficiency can be another reason for bringing in regulation. They are coming in. Now we are talking so much of climate action and sustainability. that regulations on sustainability have started to come in globally. So in future, you will see that sustainability also is regulated. You will be forced to adopt certain sustainability practices by law. Coming back to healthcare, we have a Clinical Establishment Act of 2010. It has not been adopted in all states because healthcare is a state subject. 13 states have adopted. 6 union territories have adopted, minus Delhi. Delhi has not done. So it's a slow progress, but it's happening. And recently, as I said, Data Protection Act has come, which will certainly impact healthcare services and will impact, for example, even medical devices, because devices are collecting data. So you will have to build provisions that data is not, stolen or lost. One principle that you should remember that WTO agreement requires, you cannot have a regulation separate for imports, which may be differential regulation, which means whatever regulation you apply for domestic industry can only apply to imports. Or the other way around, if you want to restrict imports by bringing in a regulation, then be prepared that domestic industry also has to be regulated. It cannot be that you have a regulation for imports, but none for the industry in the Indian market. This is called national treatment principle of WTO. That you will subject imported products to the same treatment that you subject the domestic products to. So please remember that the regulations, the moment CDSU issues regulations, they apply to imports also. The moment Food Authority issues regulations, they apply to imports also automatically, because those products are also being placed in the Indian market. And you can't have differential regulations. You can't have higher standards for imports and lower ones for the domestic market, or none for domestic. Please remember this. As far as medical devices are concerned, India has a late start, fortunately. I think first set of medical devices happened in late 1980s. And since there was not an appropriate regulation, because you need a regulation, government doesn't automatically have powers. Government needs a law to acquire powers. So Drugs and Cosmetics Act was used, and medical devices are being notified as drugs, because Drugs and Cosmetics Act had no mention of medical devices. It has only drugs and cosmetics. So perforce, something which medical device industry is very unhappy about, that medical devices are notified as drugs and then regulated. So almost 37 categories of medical devices were notified when the notification system was going on, where device by device notification was done. Today you notify PPEs, tomorrow you notify ventilators, day after tomorrow you notify something else. For the first time, a separate medical devices rules came in 2017. This is called a Medical Devices Rules 2017, were effective from 1st January 2018. And they applied only to notified devices at that point of time, in 2017 when they came. But they also classified the devices into class A to D, D being the highest risk, A being the simplest devices, lowest risk devices. The major change which came, which I told you, that during COVID time, coincidentally, not by design that somebody was anticipating COVID would come, no. It was happening on its own course, which happened on 11th of February 2020, when two notifications came out of very great importance to medical device industry. Number one, a notification which defined medical device, just the definition of medical devices. This has been an argument which was going on, and I was party to this argument, that you cannot go on notifying device by device. There are several kinds of products which cannot be notified by notifying product by product. For example, chemicals, a huge number of chemicals. For example, toys, you can't notify each product, each toy. So you have to notify a product category, and you have to regulate them by using what are called horizontal standards, which apply across the toy safety standard, applies across all toys. Electrical safety has to be maintained, applies across all medical devices which are using electricity. Or radiation safety is to be ensured, it applies all medical devices which are using radiation. So with this medical devices definition coming in, now any device which you bring in, you say you are making a new device. If it falls within that definition, it's deemed to be regulated. So there's no need to notify devices. Please remember that. So it's very important for all of you who are developing new products, new medical devices, to look at that definition and to see surely that definition should apply to you if it's a medical device. And if you fall in that definition, you are covered under the law. Simple. Second notification which came out was about phased implementation. You can't do it overnight. I mean, even CDSCO would not be having the capacity to do it overnight. Of course, industry needs time to do it. So there was a phased implementation, which was notified by another notification on the same day, 11th of February 2020. And this was the transition which was prescribed, and which was with effect from 1st April of 2020. 18 months for voluntary registration with ISO 13485 certificate. So the law required that as a medical device manufacturer, you go and register yourself, just register yourself, but with ISO 13485 certificate, which means at least ISO 13485 had to be implemented. There was nothing spoken about anything else. This was up for 18 months. After 18 months, registration was compulsory. So after 1st October 2021, you had to have registration. Then you were given 30 months time from the start, or another 12 months, you can say, from after the 18-month registration period, for Class A and B devices to comply with MDR 2007. And another 12 months were given for Class C and D to comply with MDR 2017. These periods ended on 1st October 2022 and 1st October 2023. So in all, 42 months of transition. Total transition was about 42 months, 18 plus 12 plus 12. So today one can say we are now in February of 2024, that medical devices now are totally regulated. All medical devices are regulated. But all are not under licensing. Some are exempt. Non-sterile Class A devices have been exempt. They only have to register. You don't have to have a license. But all are regulated. You have to comply with the standards which laid down. But you don't have to have a license. Formal license is not required for a very limited ones. So as of today, medical device space is completely regulated. This is only to give you a historical perspective how we have moved. Now, what does medical device 2017 require? It requires that as a product, you should comply with BIS standards wherever it's available. So you should look at BIS standards, go to BIS website. There is a department called MHD, Medical Instruments and Hospital Planning Department. Under that, something called Program of Work. If you download that, everything in BIS is downloadable. All standards are downloadable, free download. It's for the first time it has happened around the world that a standards body has made all its standards free, except those which are adoption of ISO standards or IEC standards, because they are charged, because ISO and IEC do not allow free distribution of their standards. But rest of the standards, all BIS indigenous standards are available as free downloads. If BIS standard is not available for a particular medical device, then you have to look at ISO IEC standards, and in some cases ASTM, American Society for Testing and Materials. If those standards are also not available, then manufacturers validated standards. Then you have to show that you have validated the specification of your product, and you can show that it works. Ultimately, the device should work. Device should perform what it claims to do. And this is covered under Schedule 4 of MDR 2017. There is another schedule, which is 5, which says quality management systems has to be followed. It prescribes the quality management system, which is largely based on ISO 13485, but the old version, unfortunately. This is 2003 version of ISO 13485. Now we are in the new version of 13485, which is 2016 version. So that's slight dichotomy in the regulations, that QMS required is as per the old version, and whereas 13485 now is a new version. BIS, of course, is, we should know, is Bureau of Indian Standards, which was earlier called Indian Standards Institution. That's how ISMR comes. It's a national standards body of India, where Mr. Satyendra worked and I also. Both of us worked in BIS. I think He was probably, what, a year junior to me. I joined in 1980, he joined in 1981. We correspondingly, there are bodies in every country. There's a standards body like BSI, British Standard Institution in UK, or DIN, DIN in Germany, or ANSI, American National Standard Institute in USA. Because MDR stipulates BIS standards, so BIS standards suddenly overnight became very important. Earlier also those standards existed, but nobody was too bothered about those standards. But suddenly, since the MDR referenced them, they became important. And BIS has intensified its efforts to develop more and more standards related to medical devices, or align the standards available ISO IEC standards. For example, ventilators, there are ISO standards available. ISO is International Organization for Standardization, based in Geneva. IEC is International Electrotechnical Commission, also based in Geneva. It's an older organization. IEC was born in 1906. ISO was born in 1947. So they have an understanding. ISO does not enter the area of IEC. IEC means Electrotechnical Commission, which means electrical, electronics, and IT in today's terms. So electrical, electronics, and IT goods and standards in this sector are all made by IEC. But not all BIS standards are aligned with the international standards. So that, to me, personally, I would have preferred if MDR said A, ISO IEC standards, failing which B, BIS standards, failing which whatever. But they have put it the other way, because I would have liked that we first give priority to international standards. Now, standards being there, who audits? Again, globally now, the old method was government was the regulator, government had its own inspectors to audit, government had its own labs to test, and government issued orders, gave punishments, whatever, everything was done by government. But globally now, the use of third-party labs, third-party agencies has increased. And India is also following the same trend. And medical devices rules, it said notified bodies. There's a concept of notified bodies. The body, when it is notified by CDSCO, becomes a notified body, otherwise it's an inspection or a certification. As of today, 14 notified bodies are there. You can see the link. I have given the link where you can see the list. And they have to be accredited by NABC, where I work at. And Mr. Satyendra is an assessor with NABC today. Now, the MDR says that for Class A and B medical devices, notified bodies have to be used. They may also be used for Class C and D. May, not necessarily. Otherwise, generally, Class C and D medical device manufacturers will be audited by the regulator himself. And the audit will cover both Schedule 4 and 5, which means both product compliance and QMS compliance. So you should have implemented both the BIS standards for the product as well as quality management system as per Schedule 5, or largely 13485, ISO 13485. So this is very broad overview of MDR, that you have to comply with MDR. Today, there is no option. 3 years ago, there was an option. Today, there is no option. But there are some related regulations which you should be aware of. If your device involves radiation, then you need an additional approval, and that is from AER, Atomic Energy Regulatory, based in Bombay. Or for example, X-ray machines, they require AER. Any device of any kind, medical device or otherwise, which uses radiation, will have to be approved by AER. That's the radiation safety regulator for India. AERB in turn incidentally notifies that you must have compulsory BIS certification for X-ray machines. So as an X-ray manufacturer, you go to BIS, get a license, you go to AERB, get their approval. And now you will be also covered by MDR. Only the radiation part is covered by AERB. But since AERB says comply with BIS certification, so the stipulation of MDR that you should comply with BIS standards automatically gets taken care of. The only thing now remaining is the QMS part, which also you should implement, which otherwise you were not required to when MDR was not there. Another rule which you should be aware of is the legal metrology, packaged commodities. Any commodity which is packaged, and many devices are packaged, have to follow packaged commodity rules. Earlier, devices were exempt because drugs were exempt. Drugs even today are exempt from packaged commodity. But somewhere government amended that and said, no, drugs are exempt, but medical devices are not. And now you have to follow these rules and display all the information of as is required under these rules, including the MRP. You know, every product has an MRP. If you go to the market and buy a packaged product, packaged food product or anything, you have to you are entitled to know the MRP or even an electric iron or whatever. Same thing applies to medical devices. Then you should also know about BIS Act because BIS standards are notified. And there's a difference between many times this is still a confusion in the market. Compliance to BIS standards means what? You just comply with BIS standard. How can you demonstrate that compliance? I can test a product in a lab and show you that my product complies, isn't it? That's the simplest. So compliance to BIS does not automatically means compliance to BIS certification. There are two different things, and we should remember that. In medical devices rules, compliance to BIS standards is prescribed, certification is not prescribed. Sometimes this confusion is taking place that we need to go to BIS also. No, you don't need to go to BIS. BIS does have a provision for notifying compliance and certification, which is the ISMR, popular ISMR, or another scheme called registration, which is a simplified registration scheme where you submit a test report and you get registered and you are allowed to place your product in the market. Now these are called Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. Certification is called Scheme 1. Registration is called Scheme 2. And they are the most popular methods of conformity, demonstrating conformity. Mostly certification, sometimes in low risk products especially, registration. So it's a simpler method. Now, something of interest to you is that other than medical devices, there are medical textiles which are used in hospitals, but they are not devices. Those are being regulated under BIS Act using Scheme 1, which means BIS certification. And they cover things like, as are listed here, sanitary napkins, shoe covers, dental bibs, disposable baby diaper, etc. Even bed sheet and pillow covers, which are being used in hospitals. Recently, somebody asked me a question, so I added this here. Somebody asked, is smartwatch is regulated? Well, it is regulated under electronics and IT products. Again, quality control orders, which is a typical quality control orders means these orders are issued under BIS Act. Bureau of Indian Standard Acts 2016 now. Earlier it used to be 1986, revised and promulgated. And all electronics and IT products are under Scheme 2, the simplified version of registration. You get your sample tested, get yourself registered in BIS. So smartwatches are already covered under Scheme 2 in electronics and IT products. So please remember this thing, that while you may be making a medical device, you may be subject to multiple regulations. MDR is the main one, no doubt. But if you are having radiation, you go to ARP. If it's a packaged device, you have to follow packaged commodities rules. So be careful that for different aspects, there can be different regulations. You may have to comply with it. So your responsibility to find out what all regulations apply to. Now, what happens if you want to export? This is all domestic market we are talking. Export means you comply with the regulations of the importing country. Almost all countries, you should expect that you should start with an assumption that medical devices are regulated in every country. I mean, we were unfortunate ones that till 2020, we were not so regulated. But you should start with an assumption that every country has regulations in place. And you should start with an assumption that every country has regulations in place which are generally based on international standards. Except medical PPEs. I was part of a project of International Finance Corporation, which I have listed here. And we discovered that PPEs have multiple standards. So still there are not harmonized ISO standards in PPEs. And any of you who is interested can download from this link a technical guide, very good guide, giving standards of about 13 countries, including India, including US, including European Commission. It has several countries involved, including Brazil, 13 countries, and you can see that. So what you need to do is, if you want to export, examine regulation of each country. It's called medical device regulations in EU. or there are US FDA regulation. But it is again, generally you should expect that they would ask for both product compliance and QMS. And increasingly QMS would be ISO 13485. So it's safe to follow international standards. That way it's safe to follow international standards, that when you're making a product to international standards, you are assured that you are likely to meet Indian regulations and you are likely to meet regulations of foreign countries as well. Now comes voluntary standards. You might feel, well, if I'm regulated, where is the need for voluntary standards? But the market is what it is. And even if the sector is regulated, there are voluntary standards, even private standards, or something called sustainability standards these days. And they are thriving. They are thriving in textiles, they are thriving in agri-food. A whole lot of standards are there. So first place to go for voluntary standards typically is the national standards. BIS in India, as I said. These bodies are actually private sector in developed countries. It's only in developing countries that government set up standards bodies. So our neighbors also, Sri Lanka has a standards body, Bhutan has a standards body, all are governmental. But even though they are governmental, please remember this distinction. They are governmental, but the standards are voluntary. The standards they make are, it's not obligatory to follow them unless notified by the government. And many countries are following same model as India, that BIS standards are made compulsory later on. And please remember that they are all members of ISO and IEC, and ISO or IEC even, IEC does have certification schemes. ISO does not certify. ISO is just a standard setting body and that's it. It makes standards, makes them available to the public, and that's it. Its role ends. There's no role as far as ISO certification is concerned, whether it's 13485 or 9001, etc. And these voluntary standards, why do they work in the market? They work in the market because the buyers are demanding. Ultimately, you have to sell your product. You want to go to UK, you meet the UK regulation. If there is no buyer, what good is meeting the UK regulation? You need a buyer. And the buyer says, please show me 13485 certificate. So even though you comply with Schedule 5, which is QMS, you still have to have ISO 13485 certificate separately in case of medical devices. 9001 is very popular in pharma. Pharma industry goes for 9001, although there are regulations. 22,000 very popular in food, although there are regulations. And there are a number of management system standards which are coming up, which some of which can even be useful to you. For example, 14,001, which is on environment, 50,001, which is on energy management. So there may be standards which may be useful to you in addition to the product. There could be some other aspects of your factory. So then there are some industry-driven standards. They may not apply to you, but good to know that there is something called International Automotive Task Force, 16949 for auto sector, AS9100 for aerospace, TL9000 for telecom. All these standards are actually in a way sector application of 9001. Please remember, 9001 is the most certified standard around the world, most popular and certified standard around the world. And in many sectors, they have created additional requirements to address that sector. 9001 plus, it's kind of 9001 plus standard. And then finally comes private standards and sustainability standards. They are there in textiles. So if you are into PPs, you might face, because textiles is a very favored sector for sustainability. Reuse, I mean, even PPs, multi-use PPs have come in India. The standards of BIS do have provision for multi-use PPs, although typically doctors prefer single use. You wear, perform a surgery, discard it. You wear one day and discard it. That's it. But that generated a lot of waste. In 2020, it came up that there was too much of waste of PPs. We need multi-use PPs. Any of you who is interested to explore more can go to this link which I have shown, standards map. You will find about 340 plus private sustainability standards listed there globally. It's a huge number. And many of them affect Indian industry, the agri-food industry, the food industry, the agricultural products, fruits and vegetables, and textiles. These are the major affected sectors. It's also important to understand role of BIS, because BIS does both. It is involved in voluntary standard certification, and then somewhere it comes into regulations. So first thing is to understand is, although it's a body set up by an act of parliament, which is why it's called statutory body, But its standards and certifications are both voluntary, essential. And in certification, it does both. It does product certification. It certifies a product, which is the ISM mark, the Indian Standard Institution mark, which was the old one, which is they have retained. And management system certification, which is 9001, 13485, 22000, 14001. These are all called management system standards. BIS does both, plus hallmarking. Hallmarking is product certification, of course. So please remember that BIS essentially is a voluntary standards and voluntary certification body. It has nearly 21,000 plus standards. Approximately 60% are product standards. So around, say, 12,000 standards are products. So 12,000 products are standardized by BIS, which is a huge number. BIS certification has been around. BIS was set up, ISI was set up in 1947, January of 1947, just before independence. BIS certificate came into existence in 1952. And as I said, it's voluntary unless notified compulsory. And who notifies? Not BIS. BIS has no power to notify. It's government which notifies. Government means any ministry. Every ministry is Government of India in its own sector. In case of medical devices, only compliance to standards is notified in MDRs. Just compliance to standards, not certification. I'm repeating it again. No certification is needed. BIS certification is not needed. Only compliance is to be demonstrated, which can be demonstrated simply by testing. Same thing applies to cosmetics, where BIS standards have been prescribed, but only compliance is prescribed. Certification or registration, Scheme 1 or Scheme 2, which I explained earlier, there are nearly 550 BIS standards which are notified. So out of 12,000 standards, voluntary standards, only 550 are under regulation, which is a very small figure, as you can see, just about 5%. And in fact, if you look at the figures, you will find, I have not listed here, maybe I should say it here, about 1,000 more products are under voluntary certification. 550 are notified, another 1,000 are under voluntary certification. So in all, 1,550 products approximately are under certification out of an approximate 12,000, which is still a very small number, as you can see, after so many years. Quality is not really a priority with our industry, has not really been a priority with our industry. That's a sad fact. So if you want to see list of all regulated products by BIS, you can go to this link. It will show you all the products, whether it's cements, chemicals, textiles, steel products, domestic electrical appliances, etc. Sometimes other regulators, that these are under BIS Act, but sometimes other regulators may also prescribe compulsory BIS certification. For example, you see on bottled water, ISM mark. Every bottled water has ISM mark because Food Authority has specified. It's not BIS Act, it's Food Authorities Act under which they say. Of course, now it's being removed. A decision has been taken to remove, so ISM mark on bottles will disappear shortly. Or there is something called Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization, Nagpur, PESO. LPG cylinders are one of the first items which were replaced under BIS certification. So the cylinders at home, with gas cylinders that you use at home, are carrying ISM under Indian Explosive Act. Or for example, AIRB, I mentioned that they have specified the X-ray machine should be BIS certified under Atomic Energy Act. They have done it under their own act. So you should be very clear about BIS. A, it provides standards which are voluntary. It provides voluntary certification service. B, a regulator can, or government itself can be regulator, can specify compliance to BIS standards as compulsory. Okay. Just compliance to BIS standards, no certification. C, government can notify not only compliance to BIS standards, but certification or registration to be compulsory. So these are various roles of BIS which you should be clear about. What are the other voluntary options available in ISO 13485 certificate? Of course, you can go to any number of certification bodies in the market and obtain a 13485 certificate. Whether all those bodies are good or not, we'll come to that. There's another, which is actually another session I have combined in this. Now, even though BIS standards are notified under MDR, you could still go for BIS certification as a voluntary thing if you think it helps you in the market. In fact, there are some buyers who are seeking, even in government, that you should be BIS certified when it comes to PPs. So as a PP manufacturer, you might face a buyer who says, are you BIS certified? Now, BIS certification is optional, voluntary. You decide that I don't want to go for BIS certification. I don't want to sell to this buyer. Fine. That's fine. Then in Quality Council of India, in fact, I was involved, Mr. Satyendra was also involved. We have a scheme called ICMED, Indian Certification of Medical Devices. This was created even before MDR came, and its primary purpose was to demonstrate that Indian medical devices can comply with global standards, not with BIS standards, global standards. And it has components of system certification, ICMED 13485. And ICMED 13485 has one advantage. It subsumes both Schedule 5 and ISO 13485 and new. So if you get ICMED 13485 certificate, you can get both in one. Otherwise, today, if you get 13485 certificate, you are still not compliant with Schedule 5 because there are certain differences. And if you get audited for Schedule 5, you are still not compliant with 13485 because there are differences. But if you get ICMED 13485, you are complying with both. Plus, there is a product certification option which has been launched. It's called ICMED 13485 Plus, which means you will do 13485 and you will also do product compliance. But that product compliance is to global standards. And that is varying. You can ask for European standard, you can ask for a US standard, you can ask for any standard. ISO IC standard, sure. So the intent was to create a system of demonstrating world-class medical devices, which was not there before regulations came and which is not there even after regulation because regulations require compliance to BIS standards. Then Andhra Medtech Zone Limited, which is in Vizag, which is a medical device park, they came up with an idea that some biomedical areas, some certifications are needed, which are not covered by law, but they are needed as support services. So one of them is Biomedical Equipment Maintenance Organizations, BEMC scheme. You can see the link I have given. And similarly, for example, PPs, if they are going to be multi-use PPs, that means they'll be washed. So loosely called hospital laundry, but the term uses healthcare textile processing facilities. So they are also, we developed a certification program, and incidentally, it was in my profile that Vatsala read out, that I am co-chair of this committee in AMTZ, which is developing these programs. So I mean, it's important for PP manufacturers that if they produce a multi-use PPE, they will give some instruction washing, and those washing instructions are followed scrupulously by the laundries. So there is a certification scheme for that also. Now, there is a problem in the market when it comes to certificates. When there was no legally mandated regulation, how do you assure quality? Or even if it's a voluntary certification, how do you make sure that the certificate is authentic or not? Or the test report which is submitted to you is authentic or not? Can you rely upon them? Or somebody is coming to you and saying, oh, we'll give you ISO 13485 certificate, sir, please give us an application and tomorrow we'll give you a certificate. Is that authentic or not? Do we need third-party reports or certificates? Third party means independent. First party means manufacturer or service provider. You are first party. Second party is the buyer. Third party is somebody who is neither a manufacturer nor the buyer. He has no commercial interest in that transaction. That's why he's called third party and he's called independent. Certification bodies are independent bodies. Regulators are third party. They are independent. So accreditation body like us is independent. So will they be reliable? A third party? Tomorrow I say Anil Johri Certification Services LLP and issue you the ISO 13485 certificate. Will this work? Question for you. Or Satyendra, he's so much experience. Tomorrow he starts MG Satyendra Certification Services LLP and he issues you a ISO 13485 certificate. He knows everything about 13485. Will it work in the market or not? Question for you. Anybody who wants to answer this? I mean, with all the name that I have or Satyendra has, why shouldn't it work in the market? Anil Johri is certified, must be good, no? Or to replace Anil Johri by say Tatas have a certification body. They actually have a certification body called TQ Cert. So you'll trust that? How do you trust? a certificate or a test report for that matter. Let's see some of the certificates. Here is a certificate issued in China. It's carrying CE mark also. CE mark, you heard of CE mark? That's a European regulatory mark. You know, this certificate came to me early 2020 from CII. A very well-known industrialist was importing PPEs for the purpose of donating it to the government, because government was finding it very difficult to get PPEs. And they sent this certificate to me. I looked at this certificate and I realized, yeah, this certificate is not okay. But to be doubly sure, since I have connections, I wrote to the Italian accreditation body whether this certificate is okay. Is this an authentic certification body? They came back to me to say, A, they are not a notified body in Europe. B, they are not accredited for this certification. So that CE mark actually is a fraud in a way, because if you are not a notified body, then you should not be using CE mark. So this is happening in China by an Italian body. So don't think that India only is a market where the risks are high. They are high. So I had to tell these CII that no, don't accept this certificate, don't report. Another certificate now, Indian artistry here. Something is there. Looks beautiful certificate, no? Why would you not trust it? Or this one with a CE mark on top of it. Why not? Why would you not trust it? But the problem is this. Do you know which is this certification body? ECM in Italy, QCS in USA, IMC, even location is not mentioned. Two of them are claiming some accreditation called GACB, GAAFS. Who are they? Where are they? No mention. Two of the certificates have CE mark. There have been certificates even to US FDA regulations issued by third-party bodies, although US FDA does not authorize any third-party body. And yet they are certificates. So how do you know these certificates are authentic? I, coming from this field, could look at these certificates and say, oh, all of these are bad. They are not authentic. Where is the problem? Problem is this. Anyone can set up a certification body or a lab or an inspection body. There's no law. I don't have to comply with any law. I register a organization and I start testing. If I have enough money, I'll invest in equipment and start testing. As a certification body, I don't even need that, because certification body is simply people and a laptop, or even today's smartphone will do. On the smartphone, I'll run the certificate. And auditors, you need people, that's it. And some technology. It is possible to operate without even a physical office. In NABCB, we accredited a certification body in UK without ever going to UK because it did not have a physical office. So it's possible today. Even there's an accreditation body which is without an office. I have evaluated that accreditation body, which has no office. They all working remotely. Chief executive sits in London, quality manager sits in Spain, accounts people sit in USA, and they are all connected through net and through cloud, and they are operating. So here is the problem. There's no regulation required. I can be a proprietorship, partnership, society, private, public, limited, government, non-government, profit, non-profit, whatever. I can do certification. This is the definition of certification. A third-party attestation. Third-party I have already explained, independent, related to an object of conformity assessment. Other than accreditation, which is not conformity assessment, not certification. So object could be, if you see the last sentence, could be a product, a medical device, could be a process. GMP is a process, good manufacturing process. Service, banking service, educational service, healthcare service. Organization, facility, management system, quality management system. Person, you can certify individuals. I was involved in developing a scheme to certify yoga professionals in 2015. It's today operating under Yoga Certification Board, of which I am a member of the board. So yoga instructors, yoga teachers, yoga therapists are being certified. Welders are certified globally. It's a practice to certify welders. Even auditors are certified. ISO 9001 auditors get certified. So a whole lot of individuals can get certified. You write down the knowledge and skills, you evaluate them and certify. This is how it works. There are different kinds of certifications. The one which is relevant to you as medical devices is product certification, because you want to certify the product, if at all. Process certification, like organic, good agricultural practices. Service certification. You can consider even biomedical equipment maintenance as a service, even healthcare textile processing facility as a service. And then system certification, 13485 is one of them. Quality management systems, it's a typical term, management system, quality management system, environment management system, energy management system, food safety management system, information security management system, etc., etc. There are a number of them. And personal certification. And for you, in the healthcare field in general, you might need to know that there is something called Healthcare Sector Skill Council, which certifies healthcare professionals. And there is something called IBSC, Indian Biomedical Skill Consortium, which certifies biomedical professionals. This is also in MTZ, the last one. And I was involved in setting this up. I was a three-way signatory. This is in partnership with AMED and QCI. So you could get certified personnel also for maintaining the medical devices. Now, how do you distinguish that the certification is authentic? Certification body is authentic. Because as I said, that there is no law. So if it's a government body, you might think, okay, government must be following some rules. But if it's private, then what do you do? Go by name or brand? Go by word of mouth? Name or brand means if Tata is certifying, you will think, oh, Tata must be good. Word of mouth means I have gone through an audit by some certification body. I tell my friend that this was a good one. I benefited from this. So that's how you go by word of mouth. But only recognized means internationally is something called accreditation. Whether the lab is accredited, whether the certification body is accredited, whether the inspection body is accredited or not. And what is accreditation? Again, a third-party attestation. So accreditation is also independent of a conformity assessment body. This is important. So when we talk of accreditation, we talk of conformity assessment body. Conformity assessment body, simple English, a body which assesses conformity, like lab, it assesses conformity by testing or inspection or certification. And it considers three things. A, competence. It has to be competent. Which lab can test PPEs or can test medical devices? Not every lab can test. It has to be impartial, because if you are issuing certificate, so then if you are accrediting, this is for accreditation body, then you have to be impartial. And consistent operation means same operation, same process applied to every client. This is a definition given in ISO standard called ISO 17000. 17000 series standards is for conformity assessment related subjects. So this applies to labs, inspection bodies, certification bodies, and something called validation and verification bodies. These days you are listening, I'm sure you are hearing about climate change, you are hearing about GHG emissions, you are talking about emission statements, measuring your emissions. That is the job of validation and verification bodies. And in my biodata, I think Vatsala read out that I am a member of UNFCCC panel since 2007. That is climate change. I was there last week for a meeting. I still go for meetings. Please do not confuse this accreditation that I am talking about with something called healthcare accreditation or education. NAC, you have heard of NAC, you have heard of NABH. Those, in terms of ISO definitions, are certifications because they are going directly to the industry. NABH goes to the hospitals, NAC goes to the universities, whereas NABCB goes to certifiers. Certifiers go to the university. Certifiers goes to the hospital. So one level removed. So please remember that accreditation that we are talking about is different from the term accreditation which is used in healthcare or which is used in education. Please don't confuse that. Please keep that in mind. Accreditation of the kind we are talking about only limits itself. Again, I will go back to the definition, conformity assessment body. That's it. Nothing else can be accredited. as far ISO definitions. So we accredit labs, and labs service the industry. We accredit inspection body services the industry. We accredit certification bodies service the industry. So we are one level removed from the industry. We have no direct connect with the industry. Please remember that. Now, globally, who supervises this certification? As I said earlier, ISO only does standard setting. It has no role in certification. So then who? I mean, you may think ISO certification, ISO must be supervised. No, it's not so. ISO doesn't. Then who? That who is, fortunately, there's a body called International Accreditation Forum, which was established in 1993. It's a global association of accreditation bodies. NABCB, where I was CEO, was member from India. It has developed a system of evaluation of ABs through regional bodies. So there's a regional body called Asia Pacific Accreditation Cooperation, APAC, under which India falls. And every 4 years, APAC evaluates NABCB and NABL also, for that matter. ISO provides standards. There are standards for ABs for us as an accreditation body, 17,011. There are standards for all kinds of certification bodies, whether it's management system, whether it's product or process, which is considered the same, product, process, service, whether it's personnel. And IF has an MOU with ISO to rely on its standards. So they work in tandem. They have an understanding, the formal MOU. Please remember again, IF system is voluntary. It provides authentication, yes, but it is voluntary, not required by any law. No law says that as an accreditation body, I have to be a member of IF. If I want to operate outside IF, I can. It's not illegal to operate outside IF. Problem is that if I'm operating outside IF, how do you trust me? Because in IF system, as you have seen now, IF evaluates regions every 4 years. Right now, I am an IF evaluator, and right now in the middle of an evaluation of a region, Inter-American Accreditation Cooperation. And regional body evaluates accreditation body. Accreditation body evaluates certification body or inspection body or lab. And certification body evaluates the industry. So you can see that the whole chain is being evaluated. That's why we say in our word that in God we trust, rest all have to show evidence. So we don't trust anybody. Everybody has to be evaluated. Only God, you can trust only God. So please remember that IF system is voluntary. But in some cases, regulators may prescribe certification. The exceptions are that regulators may prescribe, they may not prescribe accreditation, they may prescribe certification. For example, BIS product certification is not accredited, yet prescribed by so many regulators, and it works. CE mark, just for your information, is, I wanted to make this clear, it's a regulatory mark in Europe. Majority of the products are using CE mark based on self-declaration. They have a concept of self-declaration. An estimate says 70% of the products which carry CE mark are based on self-declaration. Only 30% require third-party intervention through notified bodies. So if you get a certificate from a notified body, you can verify it whether this is actually a notified body on the European Commission website. So regulators can specify labs or test inspection bodies or audit bodies without relying on accreditation. Even scheme owners can do that. They can authorize CBs. For example, QCI or AMTZ. They may authorize CBs without accreditation also sometimes. Generally with accreditation, but sometimes without accreditation also. So what you best is to go to the scheme owner's website and verify whether a certification body is authorized or not. If somebody is coming to you and saying, okay, I'll issue you ICMET certification, please go to ICMET website and see whether that certification body is listed there or not. If somebody says, I'll come and issue you a CE mark certificate, please go to the European Commission website and see whether that body figures in the list of notified bodies or not. If somebody says, I'll issue a certificate for Food Authority, please go to a Food Authority website and see whether that body is listed as a notified body. Or if somebody comes to you that I'll audit on behalf of CDSU, please go and see whether it's a listed body or not. So these are exceptions. Other than that, this IF system works. There are two bodies, in fact, International Accreditation Forum and International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation. ILAC is about inspection and testing. IAF is about certification and validation and verification. These two bodies are merging into one. I think 2025 or latest by 2026, there will be a single body. Then there are regional bodies, as I said. There are number of them, 5 or 6 of them. And if you go and undergo an evaluation, then you can sign their mutual recognition arrangement. It's called MLA in IAF, it's called MRA in ILAC. From India, NABCB is a signatory of IAF. NABL is signatory of ILAC. In fact, this is a slight mistake here. I should correct it. NABCB is also a signatory in ILAC for inspection. And other three, NABL, QAI, and FDAS, they are signatories for labs. So until recently, till a year and a half back, there was only NABL. But today, there are 3 accreditation bodies in India which have international equivalents: NABL, QAI, and FDAS. Please remember that. And in future, there might be more for NABCB also might face competition. Right now, it's a single body. So this is a pictorial demonstration. What I need you to understand is how it works internationally, how your certificate becomes internationally acceptable. There are 2 parts to it. One is the base standard against which you are certified. Let's take the example of 13485 because it applies to medical device. And second part is the manner in which you are certified. Both are important. One without the other has a problem. Now, if you have a standard 13485 at the bottom, and you are certified by a certification body which is compliant with the ISO 17021 and has been accredited by an accreditation body like NABCB, which is complying with 17011, which has been evaluated by APAC, which has in turn been evaluated by AFI. Whole chain is evaluated. So when your certificate comes out of this system, that certificate is internationally equivalent. And it should generally be acceptable anywhere in the world. So if you get an ISO 9001 certificate or ISO 13485 certificate with accreditation mark on it, it should be acceptable internationally. Now look at these implications from a product viewpoint. And that's why I was saying that I would have preferred if MDR had ISO standards on top and BIS standards as a second option. Now imagine the bottom standard here as a device, ventilator, let's say ventilator, which is actually an international standard. I forget the number, Satyendra will tell you the number. So if your ventilator is as per an ISO standard, it's tested in a laboratory which is accredited to 17025, and it's certified by a certification body which is accredited to 70065 for product certification. That certification body and lab are accredited by an accreditation body like NABCB or NAB. These 2 bodies are evaluated by APAC. APAC is evaluated by AFI. Then your product should become internationally acceptable because it's following an international standard and it has been certified and tested using international methods. This is the base of free trade in Europe, for example, or in ASEAN countries, where a product can move from one country to another without any duplicate testing because it's made to a common international standard. It's following a common protocol for certification or testing. So everybody accepts. So this is the beauty of this system, the system which IAF-ILAC have set up, that your product can be accepted internationally if it is certified in India by a certification body, accredited by NABCB, evaluated by APAC, in turn evaluated by IAF-ILAC. That's why the importance of IAF-ILAC system, which governments are also realizing, and increasingly in free trade agreements, this system is being referenced for acceptance of certification and testing. So if I want to accept US test report, I'll say, okay, if it's coming from an accredited lab, I'll accept, provided you accept my reports also, which are coming from accredited. So that's the reason why you should go to an accredited lab or an accredited certification body and nothing else. So how do you establish that they are accredited? These are some of the risks which are there in the market. The biggest risk in Indian market is the one I have highlighted, private ABs. Whole lot of private ABs claiming, which are outside IAF system, certification bodies are claiming accreditation. The certificates that I showed you, which had accreditation of some GABS, GASF, something. We have no knowledge of their credentials, and we are full of those kind of bodies, and this is very, very a problem. This is a problem in the market, and even governments get duped, the purchasers get duped, hospitals get duped because they don't know all this system. A typical certificate will contain all this. I'll not go into details, the name and address of the organization, scope of certification, what are you certified for, which standard or scheme, sometimes scheme like ICME, or standard ISO 9001 or ISO 13485. Date of issue expiry. In ISO certification, it's fixed 3 years. In product certification, it can vary, but ISO certification globally 3 years. There's no other way. Identification number of the certificate, name of the certification body, logo of the certification body, accreditation symbol. Sometimes IF mark also. IF mark is also there. It's optional. If it's absent, no worries. But if it's there, it's a bonus. And sometimes the scheme logos. For example, ICMET scheme will have QCI logo, or AMTZ scheme will have AMTZ logo, or the scheme logo. They may have designed the scheme logo. So this is what a certificate will contain. Some examples of certificates unaccredited. This is a certification body, but no accreditation is being claimed. Unknown accreditation. We don't know which accreditation it is. I showed you this kind of certificate earlier also. Again, another one, unknown accreditation. No standard mention. There has to be a standard. Certification has to be against a standard. There's no standard mention. GMP, Food Safety Management System. Which standard? Please tell me. Again, unknown accreditation. No standard mention. Somebody is using QCI membership also. In place of accreditation, he's putting a QCI logo. He is a member of QCI and is putting a logo and misleading. This, of course, I showed some of these certificates. This is a nice and proper certificate. NABCB logo, TUV logo, certification body, and IF. All three. Or here, Korean Accreditation Board, KAB, IAF, and certification body. These are proper, nice and proper certificates. Now what has happened is that there is a global directory. IF has created a directory. Here is the link. You can verify the certificate. Any manufacturer certificate, if it's proper, authentic certificate issued under this system, you can verify it here. For 9001, for 13485 as well. So now there is a global directory. It is still being populated. So right now it may not be complete, but in future there will be a global directory. So at least you can verify. Otherwise, there was no way of verifying those certificates. So as a guidance in general, if a product is having health and safety regulation, it usually should be under regulation. You should make sure that you know it's a regulated product and the person is holding a license. Invariably, the list of licensed manufacturers should be on the website. CDSCO, FSSAI for food, many items covered under BIS Act. I have given the links. If there are no regulations today, there will be regulations tomorrow. Some of these areas which may not concern you, but just telling you. For example, telecom, chemicals, all this have been brought in the regulations last 5 years. Machinery safety is also another regulation coming in. If there's another regulatory approval somebody is claiming, then you should be able to go to the website of those regulators and check that he's actually a valid, approved manufacturer or not. There are other ways of demonstrating compliance. You can test and show a test report. You can inspect a consignment and see whether the consignment is passing or not. And of course, voluntary certifications of all kinds. But again, beware that certificate is authentic. Either it's under IF system or it's, through a scheme owner authorized system. Like I showed one slide where I said the exceptions, the slide which said exceptions, that regulators may authorize certification bodies. They may not be under IF ILAC system, doesn't matter. BIS is not under, product certification is not accredited. Or scheme owners may authorize. So you can see those names on the scheme owner's website, so that you deal with only authentic certification bodies and not somebody who is claiming something. So finally, I would say that you usually go for an authentic certification, accredited certification, See that the accreditation body is listed on IF website or on ILAC website. See that their scope is having that certification. See, for you, easiest is the accreditation body logo should be there. If it is there, rest all you don't have to see. If accredited NABCB logo is on your certificate, you don't have to bother of rest of the things. That NABCB is taken care of. But in case you have a doubt, you can always drop a mail on these IDs to get. Of course, I can also answer, but as institutionally, this is the system. If you have a doubt, you ask Vatsala, and Vatsala can transfer that certificate to me. I'll tell you whether that certificate is okay or not. So this is to sum up finally. Almost 1 o'clock. So first thing, we need to understand that there are regulations and there are voluntary standards, and there are two distinct regimes. And you are in a space which is regulated now. 3 years ago, it was not. Today, it is. So you must keep yourself abreast with what's going on in regulations. Voluntary space is separate, usually supervised by a distinct body. Regulators will not bother about voluntary space. Regulators will focus only on regulations like CDSC. Any product which has, or service even, which has health and safety implication is going to be regulated, if not today, tomorrow. So be prepared for that. Regulations normally are responsibility of the government because it needs power. Government only can have power. That too through a legislative instrument, through an act. How private sector participates in regulation today is by way of private labs and private bodies, certification bodies getting notified by regulators. And they are usually, regulators are relying on IF/ILAC system. If you are procuring, please check that regulators, they have regulatory, the medical device manufacturer has regulatory approval. If it's voluntary certification, be careful what certificate you accept. If somebody is offering you cheap certificate, just don't fall for it. It's most likely that it's a fraudulent certificate. And of course, finally, fortunately, India has world-class systems as far as certification and testing is concerned. So why not promote our own accreditation, certification, etc. And it's easier to run a check. Checking up with Italian accreditation body is more difficult for you. I could get an answer in 24 hours. You will not get an answer in 24 hours. Because I knew those people. But in India, you can expect the Indian body will respond faster. So that's my final slide. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I have added value to you. Something new, some takeaways are there for you from this presentation. And now I am open for questions. Any questions? And I will also rely on Satyendra to answer any technical question which I may not be able to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Much needed one. We have 4 questions in the chat box. The first one is, for clinical investigations of new medical devices, can you explain the process of obtaining CDSCO approvals and ethics committee clearances? What documents and data are required?
I think this is something which I will request Satyendra to handle that.
Yeah, basically this cannot be given as a one-line answer. The whole thing is a complete chapter in IMDR, how to get the approval. There are forms given. There are in fact about 49 forms in IMDR. You are supposed to fill up the appropriate form to get the clinical clearance, also to the ethics committee, giving a complete plan of how you intend to do the clinical trials. Once the ethics committee goes through it, they give the approval, and then you approach the hospital wherever it is for the particular trial. So if you want more details, route it through Vatsala, and I can send you the complete extract from the IMDR, the process. And there are also agencies in India who help you to get, clinical trials. They have tie-ups with the hospitals. So a couple of them are authentic. You can, I can share some details about that also.
So Satyendra, I think I should have added this in my presentation. These agencies which help in clinical trials will generally be GLP compliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
They actually, Anil, they have under like one agency in Bangalore has some tie-up with Narayan Hridayalaya, Manipal hospitals and all that.
So that's the hospital part, but the data
and help facilitate, rather it's more like an agent doing it for a newcomer. Some authentic people are there. So again, one has to be careful about them. Not everybody would do it properly. So word of caution there. And one more thing, Anil, I would add is when you are looking at the scope to all of you, whether it is Indian notified body, you can get it from NABCB website, European notified body, click notified body, because of late we have found many CBs issuing certificates, they are accredited, but not for the particular device or the scope. So all the notified bodies, European here, which operate in India are actually not notified bodies. They are either branches or franchisees like TUV or any other name you take. So many of them do it for the business sake, but it's a risk. Always go to the website or ask the CB to show from the European website that the particular category of product you have is covered in the scope. NABCB, very easy to see. Just click on the CB. Then you will get all the classifications, whether they are covered for the radiation type of devices, sterile devices, implantable, everything. One shot, you can get it. Thank you.
So just to stress this point, being a certification body is one thing. Being an accredited certification body for certain services is another thing. Being notified by a regulator is a third thing, separate thing. So you may be an accredited certification body for certain services, but you are not notified by the regulator.
Yes.
So you have to be careful that when you're dealing with regulations, you look at the notified bodies at CDSCO website. When you're looking for a voluntary certification 13485, you go to NABCB website, look at certification bodies accredited for 13485. Not all of them may be notified bodies. So this distinction should be clear. A certification body which claims that it can issue 13485, and I told you how risky it is. A certification body which says I am accredited for 13485 by XYZ, NABCB, or a foreign accreditation body, legitimate. And a certification body which may say I am also a notified body, which is different. So please remember this distinction.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question is for electrical safety testing of medical equipment. What Indian and IC standards should device developers be aware of? How do these align with global standards?
With your permission, Anil, can I?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. I think IC standards are applicable even in Indian regulations.
The standard is 60601-1. Fortunately, the BIS has aligned itself, and today we have the Indian standard is also the same, IS/IEC 60601-1. Earlier, it was 13450, IS 13450, which was also like we call, adopted and adapted. APEDs where we take the gist of the standard, by and large 90% it could be same, but there are some local requirements. The adopted standards, AD, OP, TED, are those which are dual numbered these days. That means it's just a photocopy with a national forward. So we have, fortunately, the electromedical standards, the horizontal standard or the product family standard is 60601, applies to all electromedical equipment. And there are some labs also who are able to test. So again, if you want the details, route it through her. I can identify the labs and inform based on the product. I'll have to do the product.
Okay. Sir, next question is regarding standards. How should innovators decide whether to pursue an ISO 13485 versus a quality management system for medical devices? What factors should inform this decision? Could you outline a typical process and timelines for obtaining US FDA approval for a Class 3 medical device developed in India? What clinical data is required?
The first part I can answer. First thing is you need to look at the regulation. What does it prescribe? For example, Indian medical device rules prescribe Schedule 5. They don't say ISO 13485. It may be based on 13485, but you have to comply with Schedule 5. And as I said, it's an old 13485.
Okay.
Some regulations may specify 13485, then 13485 is fine. So the choice will depend on what your regulation you are aiming at. If you are aiming for US market, US is now going to 13485 formally. So it depends on which market you are aiming at. Look at the regulation, what it prescribes clearly, 13485 or quality management system. There may be just minor changes, but they are not the same. So that is what which will make my decision. As far as 13485 voluntary certificate is concerned, given its value that it works in the international market, even though it's not no longer required for registration. It was required under MDR. But once you are registered, once you are licensed, MDR does not need. And therefore, but I would still, if I have export ambitions, I will still maintain a 34. For the US FDA part, I think I will
Yeah,
let
I can answer. Again, the class 3 devices for FDA require what is known as pre-market approval, and that requires a lot of clinical data. Now, what kind of clinical data? Again, I can send you the document from the FDA website. Offhand, I don't have it here. But then there is a lot of scientific evidence. Your studies, see, this is the most expensive and elaborate thing as far as FDA. In fact, the testing doesn't cost much. Incidentally, for one of our IIT incubator only, we had checked up for the ventilator. The evaluation or the cost by an approved reviewer on the clinical data was 60,000 US. So you can imagine what kind of a data is required. And if it's the first of its kind of device, we call it de novo process, in which you will have to send the device and for a pre-submission, they will also evaluate that and give you a kind of a report. So it's little lengthy process for the class 3. If it's already having a predicate device in the market, then it becomes little easy for you. So you can give all the data, how similar is your device, and then the approval process goes through. So again, those forms are available. FDA, fortunately, a lot of documents are available in open source. You can just go there, download them. And as Anil told, the 810 CFR, all those things are being now changed to align with the new ISO 13485. So the quality management system is going to be same, which would be a great advantage for Indian manufacturers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, in case of laws surrounding these single-time plastic bottles and the kind of fake logos that are used on them, how can we curb them, or steps we can take on a personal level to stop them?
Now, I'm just wondering whether plastic bottles are regulated. Satyendra, do you have an idea? If it is there, it would be under BIS Act.
Yeah, plastic bottles are regulated. There is a standard for bottles. I don't remember. Why I know is there's one of the incubators in South. He is now making this, bottle with a UV purifier added to it, a small battery operated device. So he was told that the bottle has to be certified by BIS. So if you go to the BIS website, I think you will get the bottle standard. It is regulated now. But that whether it is plastic or stainless steel, I'll have to look at it.
I had given that link of compulsory BIS certification.
Yeah, you can have a look in.
So in that list,
food grade material. Basically, I think it should apply to all bottles carrying water, because essentially we are looking at a food grade material like ASI 304 or some material like that in metal, steel. And I think plastic also should be there.
Okay. And he also writes that I have heard about the biodegradable one-time use plastic bottles, which is undergoing certification. Have you heard about it, or do you think there's any update regarding this?
I have no idea, honestly. Of course, the product is there, but we'll have to see whether.
Okay. The next question is, what are the actions that can be taken against people who use these fraudulent certificates?
Now, here I would like to caution you. Certificates, issuing a certificate is not an illegal activity. I can issue a certificate ISO 13485 to you because there's nowhere prescribed that I should be accredited or whatever.
Okay.
So there's nothing illegal about my issuing a certificate. Now, whether this certificate will work in the market, whether you realize that this certificate will not work in the market, that is where I use the term. That's why I don't use fraudulent, I use unauthentic.
Okay.
Even that sometimes gets challenged because somebody will ask, where is it written? So you have to be careful that issuing a certificate is not illegal in India. Whether you followed the process or not, you issued it by not following the process, but where is the law requiring that you should follow the process? If you are accredited, it requires you to follow the process, but that's an individual contract. So please be careful. That's why I have been personally pushing for a regulation in India, a law on for certification bodies and labs, etc. But labs are also issuing reports without testing. What do you do? The certification bodies are issuing certificates without auditing. This is unethical, but not really illegal, because there is no requirement in law which says that I must audit you and then issue a certificate. The international norms are there, but they are all voluntary. Please remember that. That's the problem. That's why you have to be careful. So if somebody tells you something and cheats you, then it becomes fraudulent, and you can, famous IPC 420, 420 इसीलिए बोलते थे ना, IPC का the section was 420.
Yeah. Okay, the next question is, in case if medical device is not available in India, but is available in another country, whether clinical investigation is required on Indian population, or can we go with the data available for the predicate in other country?
See, you can go with the data provided they are from US, UK, Japan. There are about 5 to 6 countries where it is exempted. In other cases, yes, you have to produce the evidence. You may have to do some kind of a clinical investigation in India, and these are basically decided by the Central Licensing Authority based on the evaluation or your application along with the data. So we cannot, firmly say yes or no here. But there are about 5 countries, MDSAP countries mostly, which have been taken into consideration by CDSCO. And they say that if these devices are approved in those countries, they are exempted. But of course, the data has to be provided, the application and other formalities have to be fulfilled, including signing the agreement and by the authorized signatory and whatnot.
Sure. This person wants to know about the product testing, which is not available in India, and can do self-testing and declare voluntary that we are following the ISO standard of the particular device.
Well, let me answer in this way.
Yeah.
Number one, medical device rules require you are regulated, and you are supposed to demonstrate compliance to BIS standards. Number one. If BIS standard is not there, then only ISO standards come into play. And you will be audited by, if you are a class A and B, you will be audited by a notified body. If you are class C and D, you will be audited by the regulator. Now, voluntarily, if you want to demonstrate that your product, in addition to BIS standard, complies with the ISO standard, of course, you can get your product tested and claim that you are complying with the ISO standard. That's one way of demonstration. Self-testing, certainly you can do self-testing and declare voluntarily. There is something called supplier's declaration of conformity. That's also a route of self-declaration, is also a route of which Europeans use in their regulations. So as I said in my presentation, about 70% of products which bear a CE mark are based on self-declaration only, following a certain protocol. That protocol is laid down for your interest if you want to really follow this route. In ISO 17050, there is a standard on self-declaration which lays down the protocol. What is the protocol to self-declare? It's not that you just declare like that. So the question is, if you want to voluntarily test in your own lab and self-declare, it is possible to do. It's a voluntary space. But if the regulation requires something else, you should follow what the regulation is.
Okay.
Only catch here is the device should be a simple, like, class 1 device in EU or in FDA, and in India, class A device. But in India, they are also regulated. So you have to anyway apply to CDSCO. So they would verify like Anil told, the state level authority would verify the compliance.
Yeah.
But for Europe and others, yes, if it's a very simple device, non-sterile device, class 1 device, you can do that.
And Satyendra, is it required to maintain what is called a technical file?
Yes. Technical file has to be maintained immaterial of the mode of compliance, or whether you are going through a notified body, you're doing self-declaration. Technical file and all the formalities of 17050, including the declaration of conformity, have to be followed for all classes.
Okay.
One last question we're taking up. It is please brief about MD07 and MD12 requirement.
These are forms, I think. So
These
Satendra, you
are
may-
forms, and I think I can send them to you, Vatsala. If
Okay.
you want.
Okay.
See, offhand, I cannot remember what they contain. As I told, there are 49 forms. And in fact, what I would tell the audience is the IMDR 2017 with all the revisions is available for free download from the CDSCO website. So if you go to CDO website, you can download, and all the forms, MD 1 to 49, are annexed there. So you look at the form, it's all self-explanatory. Still,
Okay.
if you have any doubts, yes, I can send a link for that to Vatsala if you want, and she can share it with those who want to download the MDR, or I can share the MDR itself by the link. I'll send you the document itself. So you
Sure.
can share.
And Pragati earlier asked a question. She has given a follow-up that she has received a test license for the medical device, which is first time in India, but it has a predicate in Europe. So do we have to go for a clinical investigation, and what is the procedure?
So you will have to again, I mean, this is a case where you have to discuss with the regulator, CDSCO. If it had a predicate device and if you had provided all the data, I don't know which class of device it is. See, there are a lot of problems, ma'am, and Anil also knows. I've been assessing, and we found last week only in one of the manufacturer, he is making PPs. Incidentally, he is the president of the Association of PPs. He has got a test license to make 15 pieces. He has a huge sterilizer which is lying idle because it is under test. Now, the sterilization, we were just casually asking, why can't you offer the services to others? He says the South people don't allow that. The same sterilizer is allowed under, I mean, license is given in North. So there is a lot of harmonization and syncing required within the regulator also, because this guy said, "वो गलती करेगा तो हम भी करें क्या?" I mean, this was the exact answer it seems the officer in Vijayawada gave to this gentleman. So there are a lot of problems. Like this lady who has applied, I don't know what is her product. If there has been a predicate device, they always give a test license. That's a formality. In fact, a manufacturer in Mysore who's exporting to 17 countries for last 2 decades was also asked to take a test license for X-ray machines and ultrasound equipment. And incidentally, he's also was the president of FICCI for medical devices, and he was laughing. But they say, no, this is a formality. You take this. After that, you apply with all the data, you will get a license. So they are.
So the advice would be that you please talk to your local regulator where you
Yes,
located.
Anil.
Because there's lack of harmonization.
If data is authentic, test license, as I told you, is a formality. They are going by the book. So it will be given in any case.
Okay, sir. So we are done with the questions. And to all those who are asking me about the recording of this session, yes, the recording of this session is available on the YouTube handle of Startup Incubation and Innovation Center, IIT Kanpur. Just in a few minutes, it will be done. So thank you so much, Anil sir and Saten sir. It was really, really nice to have
One
you
more
both
question
here.
has come, Vatsala, on SAMD.
I am sorry. Yeah, so
Please
please
tell whether the test license is mandated to submit for SAMD, software as medical device, as this requirement is part of MD7.
It is. As far as I know, yeah, you have to take a test license for that also. See, right now, let us also understand the IMDR also it's in its infancy. A lot of changes have to come. The whole thing has been made with the mindset of pharma industry. Even the test license. As I told you, it becomes a laughing stock when you issue a test license to somebody who has MD SAP, he has UL, and his products are sold in 17 countries for 2 decades. So, I mean, there has to be a lot of evaluation feedbacks have to come from people, and IIT, I think, can play a major role in this to modify, amend.
Provide feedback to the regulator.
Yes. To make it device specific, it will take a couple of years, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm teething problems for MDR, I guess.
Indeed.
In fact, Satyendra wrote somewhere, I seem to have missed this part, that date has been extended for CND till April
12th
24th?
April, I suppose another month only now, month and a half.
Okay, all right. Somehow I seem to have missed that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I have pasted the link of the recording of this session. And thank you so much to both of you, Anil sir and Satyen sir, from all of us, my colleagues, myself, and the startup founders available here. We have really benefited from this knowledgeable session. And if there are any further questions, I will write back to both of you.
Sure.
Yeah, Vatsala.
Thank you so much
Sure.
for your time, sir. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
thank you very much,
everyone, for
Vatsala.
joining.
It was a pleasure to be
Thanks,
here
sir.
and to
Yes,
share our whatever information we have.
indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a good day, everyone.
Same to you all. Bye.
Thank you.